Cypress, the Counterintelligence Podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we're live. Ryan Rambo.
Jeremy Clark.
You had coined this for us. Demystifying Counterintelligence. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, and I'm really excited about this podcast, a series that we're doing. I think it's long overdue. I think we set the stage with all of our guests that we had leading up to episode 10, and then the kickoff of the series. So I just re-listened to part 2 yesterday. Holy cow! It was.
Hopefully our audience will agree out there. Thank you, first of all, for listening, and we always love your feedback, so keep it coming, please. But yeah, I listened to it. Man, I'm excited about this whole series.
I am too, and the feedback has been great. It's been very positive. I actually got a one-word feedback from somebody, still unknown who that is because it's anonymized in Podbean, but the one word was smooth. S-M-O-V-E. So whoever gave us that feedback, thank you very much. That was a smooth piece of feedback that we got from you. Thank you.
I love it. Everybody reached out with ideas for us to discuss. Ryan, I think when we initially set off on this venture, we were thinking maybe 10, 12 episodes. With the influx of comments and recommendations, it just continues to pile. Ryan, this is going to be an enduring requirement. I don't think we're going to put a cap on it.
No, and we probably shouldn't, because the field of counterintelligence is so broad. And there's so many different topics, so many things that you and I have just talked about as the series has unfolded. And great ideas, great feedback. And so this may be something that we do once a week for the next year. So I think there's enough material out there for us to cover it.
Yeah, I agree with you. We start off with what is counterintelligence, transition into why counterintelligence is important. And Ryan, what are we covering next?
We are covering the how of counterintelligence today. Oof. What a great, this is the thing that gets me excited. So now, throughout my military career, I shied away from staff positions. I never really wanted to be on the staff. I always wanted to be into the operational side, which speaks to the how. How is it done? Being on the street and doing actual counterintelligence investigations and operations and the 5 functions. It's what got me excited. It got me out of bed every day. And I know that you're the same way. And oh God, I can't wait for this discussion. So Jeremy, what's covered in the how?
Now, Ryan, first before that, right, I agree, right? I did not want to be a staff officer, but, I got promoted, and now you have to take on more responsibility. I'm glad I did it. You get to see a little bit more counterintelligence. Man, I love the how. I love doing. And remember, you can't do counterintelligence from behind a desk. You need to get out there. And we're going to explain how that's done through the 5 functions. And Ryan, those 5 functions: investigations, operations, collections, analysis and production, and technical, or sometimes called functional services, that catch-all. I think we should just review each category, go right down the list and talk about each one.
I think so too. They're so critical, and it takes all 5 functions to have a holistic counterintelligence program. But it kicks off, the first one is investigations. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on investigations?
Man, out of all the other functions out there, counterintelligence, to me, is known for investigations. When something happens, an incident occurs, a spy is caught, there's a whole big process before it gets up to there. But even taking a step away from that, the start of an investigation is a reactive type of entity to me, or a reactive response to something happening, whether somebody's come in to the field office or to a unit and to an organization and reports a suspicious activity, maybe a foreign contact, but it's purely a reactive thing to me. And really, I think counterintelligence investigations is kind of focused on a systematic process of either proving or disproving those allegations in that incident.
And I love what you said, because it's reactive. And it's funny enough that, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit here, but that's the whole point behind 351X, actually, is because that's those things, those elements that we have inside 351X, whether it's employee reporting, cybersecurity tools, OSIN alerts, or liaison, that those are the things that are the predication for an investigation. And so when we have those four elements flowing into the counterintelligence team, it gives us a pure right to go out and conduct investigations.
That's right. That, the government says you need to report these things, whether it's foreign contact, foreign travel, suspicious activity reports. There's a whole list of that, or anything personal that affects your life, declaring bankruptcy, undue affluence, marrying a foreign national. The government, if you have a clearance, you need to report that. I love how kind of 351X does kind of take into consideration all that employer reporting to identify investigative leads when it comes in. If I was out there and I'm either the defense industry base or a government position, and I see somebody drive up in a Jaguar and say he's an E4, maybe they inherited a lot of money, but that's weird. How can an E4 afford a Jaguar? Or maybe he's driving up in a Lambo. Well, there could be some indicators out there that he is naturally wealthy. Maybe he hit it large at a casino. See something, say something, report that so somebody can take a look. Is something nefarious happening? That's what I think of how I think 351X kind of support investigations.
Well, it's funny that we mentioned Executive Order 12333 in part two, and it's the why and why it's so important. But it also restricts on what counterintelligence professionals can go and investigate, especially as it relates to a U.S. person. Of course, we can't just willy-nilly open an investigation on somebody. There has to be some predication that justifies this, and there's oversight and control. Whether somebody comes in and reports something to us or we observe it. I mean, I've opened a case on my own observations in the past, which is a weird thing to do, to quote yourself as source in a investigative document, but it can happen. But having that proper predication is what allows us the authority to go out and open an investigation. Now, that said, counterintelligence professionals and most special agents have standing investigative authority as well. And I'm going to put you on the spot, but what are your thoughts on standing investigative authority?
Yeah, sure. So first, to do a counterintelligence investigation, you have to have the mission. So you have to be assigned to a unit that does counterintelligence and mission set investigations. The next thing, you have to be trained to do it. So, there's a whole process, there's certifications out there with whatever entity out there of how to properly do it. I mean, whether it's you're going through FLETC or you're going through a CI certification course with the different departments out there, you need to be trained to do it. And the last one says, hey, just because you're assigned to a unit that does it, you might not have the authority to actually execute those missions. So for long story less long, Ryan, mission training authority when it comes into conducting those type of operations, or in this case, an investigation.
Yeah.
Now going back, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Your thoughts on standing investigative authority as a counterintelligence professional?
Yeah. So what are those things, right? Standing investigative authority. I think there are those kind of 72 hours, I believe it is, where you have the opportunity to get out there and kind of understand what's happening. Just because somebody reports something, good job, they reported it. It might not be a CI or a counterintelligence matter. It may be a criminal matter. So it's those limited authorities that you're given just to kind of pull the thread on putting together a better comprehensive product so it goes up into staffing. Just because somebody reports something, it may not be counterintelligence involvement. It could be a criminal type of involvement. How'd I do, Ryan? And what do you think?
So fantastic. You're spot on. And then another caveat that I would add onto it is to fully identify subject. So you may get bits and pieces like a first name or, some address or something like that. So you have a little bit of standing investigative authority to make sure that you fully identify the subject of the investigation to within the guidelines and restrictions that you can operate in. So, but standing investigative authority is important. I mean, it gives us the ability to go out and use that. Now, in a corporate environment, every investigative policy that I ever wrote and staffed through the legal department and employee relations, I always made that stipulation that we would have some standing investigative authority. Because in a corporate environment, we're not beholden to Executive 12333 or any of the government restrictions, but it's nice to have. You want to put those and build those into place to protect yourself as the investigator. A standing investigative authority in a corporate environment gave us the authority to go and do limited threat hunting. So that's going out and taking a look at some of the cybersecurity logs, or finding stuff on open source intelligence platforms, or talking to employees to, maybe, I don't want to say induce a predication, but sometimes CI surveys are a very important tool for identifying, if nefarious things are happening within the organization. So having that standing investigative authority for a counterintelligence professional is absolutely critically important.
Yeah, that least intrusive means all the way up through the most intrusive means, and the whole line you have to walk through. But we talked about 1, 2, 3 last time, and the organizations, and how kind of intelligence communities, authorities, and missions came to fruition. One thing you always need to consider in an investigation is the presumption of innocence. Just because somebody's going to report it on, it may not be nefarious. So always something to consider because of civil liberties, that presumption of innocence. Ryan, when I think about investigations as well, really kind of identify those individuals. But before you get into that, how do the leads even come to light? How does somebody even report it? And what are the different mechanisms out there? There comes in a whole bunch of different ways. It can come in through liaison, just working with another company. It could come in through another government partner. It could come in through another intelligence discipline. It could come in self-reporting. It could come into suspicious activity reported by somebody. There's so many different mechanisms that kick off an investigation. And really, it's kind of endless, just because there's so many different means the adversary is trying to get inside that company or behind the fence into our space as counterintelligence professionals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was many cases that I've worked over the years that you were predicated off of liaison that I conducted with foreign intelligence services and foreign security services. They would come in and say, "Hey, there's this weird thing that happened. They're an American citizen. Can you take a look at it and potentially resolve this issue for us?" So many different ways. It could come through technical platforms. It could come through the rumor mill. I mean, it's so many different ways that investigations flow. Now, you brought up something that I thought was is a concept that's very, very important. And again, another one of those things that I write into investigative policies from a corporate standpoint, and that's least intrusive means. And would you mind expanding on that just a little bit? That it's kind of the essence of how we conduct a counterintelligence investigation.
Yeah, that's right. So anything that's free and open, to be honest, like if you're in the government, you're going to go check somebody's records at the human resource or S1 shops, better known. You can talk to coworkers just to kind of uncover, is there really an incident to report here in a limited capacity? But what you can't do is start employing electronic or physical surveillance. It's a little bit more intrusive. So just kind of those open opportunities and just that open data, that's what I would consider you can kind of collect on.
Yeah, and I think it goes to the allegations. So a lot of times when we get a report of potential nefarious activity that kicks off an investigation, it involves an allegation. Yeah, I observed somebody doing this, and I allege that they're stealing classified information or proprietary information. Well, if a records check going through and taking a look at cybersecurity logs, or taking a look at their network activities, proves or disproves the allegation, well, then you just stop there. There's, like you said, there's no need to go and bug their house. If you can go to security log in and find the answer. So it's going through that process of what is the easiest, or not the easiest, what's the least intrusive way of answering allegations.
That's right. Least intrusive. And really, it's a process, Ryan. I want to hammer that home too. This isn't something you're going to do off the cuff. It's very defined. Here's how you're going to get to the point of either confirming or refuting those allegations. One thing often too that is like probably one of the most helpful in counterintelligence investigations is a defector. A Russian defector jumps over and he has a case file of spies that he was working currently in the US or the government or something along those lines, and those defectors out there coming in that way. I do want to note that because there are several books on my bookshelf that talk about that as a means to start investigations.
Yeah, the Troikan archive. I mean, we have all kinds. It goes back to Nosenko. There's a ton of history on defectors that come over and say, here's my notebook. Here's all the reports that I've seen. So it appeared to be a source within the States. And he just off so many different investigations. So Jeremy, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and I think we
Yeah,
could probably do an episode just on the investigations. But that's a nice overview of
that's right.
where we're from an investigative standpoint. What would
Yeah,
you
I
say?
think so too. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, investigations, that systematic process to prove or disprove allegations. It's interviewing people and it's evidence collection. Because if you're proving the elements of espionage, evidence is going to go to court and it needs to be through a chain of custody. That's why it's so important to have that process to go through. Because again, if you disprove it, fine, let's just throw it away. But if it's proving allegations of espionage or sabotage or subversion, and process needs to be very deliberate because the defense attorney is going to try to rip that apart.
100%. So if investigations are reactive, what would be the proactive? I'm segueing into the next one. So investigations are reactive. What is the proactive side of this thing?
Man, I think there's two. So there's operations and their collection, but I want to talk about operations. Ryan, unlike investigations, I've never done them. I've been around them. I've saw oversight a little bit of them throughout my career, but I've never put pen to paper or wrote an investigative plan, interviewed individuals through an investigation. Never had the opportunity to do that. My favorite one is operations, though, and it is very proactive.
Well, talk to us about it, because you have more experience. I have some more on the defensive side, but it's two sides of the same coin. So operations, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it. So I think, first of all, it's a proactive means to deter aggression against either a company out there or, us as the government or retirees from the government, what we did through our entire career. So we're trying to fend off the adversary from recruiting real spies. And it's done kind of two different ways, right? And this is all open source. People get squirrely when I say this first term, but it's all out there. Everybody knows it. There's books out there that do it, but they're done, and it's a means to proactively protect, because that's what counterintelligence does, equity, people, technology, critical infrastructure. And the other one kind of bucket in that is a defensive source operations. And what they do is they're identifying threats, either external threats trying to get inside the wire through not nearly as aggressive a means, or those internal threats, where are they positioned? So getting sensors out there, if you will, people often, not always, but just trying to identify who's in the wire, what are they doing, who's outside the wire, and trying to get in, and how can we affect or manipulate that, but kind of really executing kind of covert type of actions to disrupt those foreign entities out there. And again, those two buckets I would consider defensive sources.
And I love that. And so from a military standpoint, we always have cavalry troops, and the cav was always required to go out and make contact with the enemy, because you can't hardly, determine what the adversary is doing, what the enemy is doing, what they know, what they don't know, how they operate, until we have contact with them. And so the cav was always sent out first to go and make contact. Well, that's kind of what operations means to me, is that we're using techniques and operations to try to get in contact with the adversary, so that we could learn from them, that we can understand how they go about their business, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. And we can only do that if we have, face to face, smell the coffee on their breath contact through operations. And so that's why I think operations are so important. Now, operations, it's not just a human to human thing, right? It could be other type of operations. And whenever I think of this, I think of cybersecurity, going out and doing your cybersecurity operations. What other ways have you seen operations done that you can speak about? Now, don't get yourself in trouble.
Sure. No doubt. I will, right? And that's why we're not going to go into methods or means of how rework is done. It's probably right across the line. The term, again, is unclassified. In fact, you could do ChatGPT, Gronk, all these other mechanisms out there, and ask them what offensive counterintelligence is. It pulls up those two buckets. That's what I did to make sure we were good. I digress. So, number one, the book that I love the most, Ryan, is called The Double Cross System. It's written in the, if you will, Queen's English from World War II, and it's how the British intelligence service, the MI5 and MI6, were duping over Nazi Germany. There's so many great stories in this, and I just want to explain two. The first one being, they call it a double agent operation. They would take dead soldiers, unfortunately Allied soldiers, and let them wash up on shore of Nazi Germany. You know what? These soldiers, the German soldiers, they would go around and police up to identify if they've had information that was left on them. Maps, cipher codes, anything that they could. Well, what the Brits did, they put that information on those bodies that were getting washed up on shore. So when the Germans are searching that attire, searching that gear, guess what they find? A map. Guess what that's not really though? The real plan or the real objectives. But you're making the Germans think, oh, gold, we've got a map. We know that they're going to attack from here. But guess what the Brits didn't do or the Allied services do? They didn't attack from that position. So again, there's multiple stories in there of how they kind of duped over through a double cross system, the Germans. The other one, which I thought was interesting, and this probably can't happen now. There's multiple books out there, and one of them is called Fair Play, the ethical dilemmas of kind of intelligence operations and stuff, which, Ryan, I think we should talk about probably in a future episode. We'll put a pin in that, though. So the Brits, they put together an operation knowing the Germans were going to sabotage a particular building. And it housed food, it housed munitions, and it housed a whole bunch of other things, logistical supplies. Well, the Brits intercepted it on the Germans, knowing that they were going to conduct the sabotage. So what the Brits did, they pulled what little resources they had there. They pulled some of the resources out. They moved it, but they kept a lot of the resources in. You know what else they did, Ryan? It's so funny to me. They dug up cadavers that were in graves, suited them up, put them back in the building, and let the Germans hit it. Nobody was hurt. But what this did, it illustrated the Germans' spy that they had was actually executing operations, so much so they conducted a sabotage operation that hurt the logistics, but it didn't really. The Brits set the Germans up later down the line to use that spy to counter back. And boy, I mean, when you have a spy the Germans had a spy in the British service. They said, this building has logistics, blow it up. And he does. That goes to bona fides. The Germans probably thought they had a real spy. But the Brits, being smart enough and playing chess, not checkers, were able to outmaneuver the Germans and used it later on. And I'm not going to give the whole story away because it's really a great book and a great story, but give it a read. That's how I would consider two different means: washed up bodies with maps on it and blowing up a building to conduct real sabotage. Wild.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the Brits because they were so great at this. I mean, if you've watched any of the movies or read any of the literature, they kind of set the foundation for modern day counterintelligence operations. And I heard at one point or read somewhere that the British had already identified every Nazi spy that they had operating inside Great Britain, and they didn't roll them up because there was operational potential to each one of those sources. So I think they had broken the communications system, so they knew how they were communicating, and they were able to quickly identify all of. So there was an investigative aspect of it, of course, that bled over into an operational side of this. So fantastic how that worked together to give the Brits an advantage during that time.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Ryan. All these operations, really, the whole goal is to understand how the adversary is attacking that particular entity, whether it's a government or a corporate entity. How is the adversary attacking us? So we'll do operations to understand their tactics, techniques, procedures, the modus operandi, and we'll kind of reverse engineer that to see if we have true spies in our rank, or if there's an investigation going on. Are we seeing these real things in operations that we can catch a real bad guy? I think it's lost on a lot of people. Operations support investigations. We do these things to understand how the adversary is disrupting or getting after our equity. One way, defensive source operations, the same thing, not as aggressive, but they are out there to identify those gaps, either external, internal, whether people go to various events out there that are open and free, or maybe it's a friend of the office who's taking a look at protecting this infrastructure, keeping his ears open of who's asking questions. All ties back to let's catch real bad guys, though.
And there's a great series out. It just recently came out. It's called Operation Mincemeat. if you, I recommend you watch that series. I can't remember if it's on Netflix or Paramount or one of them, probably Prime if you could find that. But it lays out that first operation that you were talking about, where they floated, unfortunately, a dead Allied soldier onto the beach in Spain, and then it made us all the way back to Berlin. I mean, just fantastic story, and a pretty well done miniseries as well.
I haven't watched that miniseries. I'll have to.
Oh yeah, it's
Well,
fantastic.
Ryan, what do you think? So operations, we've gone through investigations, operations. That third one, collections, proactive. What do you think?
I love it so much. I mean, collections is where it's at. And it's our opportunity to take a glimpse across the full spectrum of information flowing in to the intelligence community or into the corporate environment, and then determining, do we have a counterintelligence problem? Is there something going on that we should be aware of from a counterintelligence perspective to protect ourselves? And so it involves all the ends. It's just wonderful. And then once we understand what their capabilities are, then protecting against their side intelligence capabilities. So, Jeremy, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well said, man. So proactive, number one, get out there and engage individuals. It's going to inform the counterintelligence community. It's going to inform investigations and operations. But collections, to me, is your bread and butter. The covering agent programs, the liaison, whatever you want to call it. It can be debriefing of individuals that travel overseas or have contact with individuals, engagements. But it's kind of that blanket, if you will, of counterintelligence and protecting the force. Friends of the office, whatever you want to call them, knowing your battle space. If you're working in a particular sector within the corporate industry, if you're working for a particular sector in the government, protecting critical infrastructure or R&D sites, knowing your battle space and what's in it, and what, based on analysis, which we'll get to next, what would the adversary want to know and why, and how are they collecting it? And us, as professional counterintelligence agents out there, are trying to understand our battle space through that covering agent program, the liaison, and all these things, but uncover those breaches through just conversations, training, knowledge, those type of things.
And it can't be a vacuum cleaner approach to information collection. And so it really has to be specific and tailored to the counterintelligence mission, whatever that mission is, whether it's force protection, leading into operations, other types of operations, investigations. I mean, the collection piece has to be dialed in. And I've seen it in the past where, counterintelligence professionals may have gone off the path a little bit just because they were getting kudos on some of the information that they were collecting, but it wasn't relevant to the counterintelligence mission. So whenever we talk about the functions of counterintelligence, the collections that we're talking about are very much dialed in to the mission that we're trying to support. Like you said, our battle space and, our CAP program, our liaison program, all of that is designed with one purpose in mind, and that is to identify any threats that are outside the wire, and then also to identify any threats that could potentially be inside the wire. So very, very important distinction from a collection standpoint, counterintelligence wise, versus what we would see in other intelligence organizations across the board.
Yeah, spot on, Ryan. I think it needs to be deliberate. You need to know what needs to be protected. When I think about counterintelligence, it's inward facing. What do we have that we need to protect against the adversary? And I was on a tactical HUMIT team to start my career, and CI and HUMIT was one word. Because we talk to people differently. But early on in my career, I did more HUMIT than I did CI, hands down. And when we're out there engaging, CAP or debriefing individuals, I was writing more IIRs than I were CIRs, or counterintelligence incident reports and information, whatever reports, right? HUMIT versus CI. That whole needs to be a whole new episode. I digress. So again, looking at identifying what's in the wire, how did they get here, or what's outside trying to get into the wire? It's that inward facing look. And it includes, what do we need to protect? Our people, our critical infrastructure, or technology.
And I think collections also, from a counterintelligence standpoint, is going out and identifying that intellectual property or that new technology that's out on in the military terms, that national defense information, that new technology that we're going to employ or that we're using, you need to know about that so that you can protect that capability. And on the corporate side, it's going through and, identifying all of the, intellectual property you have, but it's also collecting to see who all touches that information, what third-party vendors you have, what's your supply chain look like, who are the investors that are really interested in your success or failure. So all of those things from a collection standpoint on the corporate side are just as critically important to the overall CI mission as it is in the defense industrial base or from a national security standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. I mean, technology is a whole new venture. But you look at technology at the supply chain risk management, material to composition or software, hardware, coding, all these things that needs to be protected, proprietary information, classified information, and understanding what do I need to protect as a CI professional at the particular organization you're in. You need to get out there and shake hands and smell the coffee off people's breaths to understand what is out there, what do they look like, what do we need to protect? Because nobody's more passionate about counterintelligence than us as counterintelligence professionals. It's not going to be, the security representative. It's not going to be the CEO. It might be because it's going to affect bottom line. But we need to sell that, going back to why real quick. That's why counterintelligence programs exist. But we're protecting equity. We're identifying threats. We're exploiting those threats, and we're going to neutralize those threats. IXN, how clever.
It's so weird how that worked out. But one of the things about collections that I have to point out, and I think this is probably the best section to mention it, is making sure that it's database properly, that it's indexed properly, that you can go back and look at that historical record. And sometimes I don't think that we're very good at it. I know we're not very good at it on the corporate side because I have the scars to prove it. I mean, storing information or going out and having great collections and going out and, having all of that information and then not storing it in a database where you can review it later or analyze it for potential later hurts all programs. And so I've seen it where reports would flow into an email inbox, which get lost. I've seen reports that are put in a shared drive, which are very hard to search and find. I've seen it in Teams chats, Yammer. I've seen it spread across all of these different platforms, and it's not consolidated into one piece. And it's very important because when we get ready to talk about analysis and production, it's kind of hard to do analysis of production whenever you have these disparate pieces of information floating over multiple systems and you can't grab it when you need it. So I think it's important to talk about it as a key aspect of collections. It's also the databasing, storing, and retrieval of that information when you need it.
Yeah, that's spot on, Ryan. How can you uncover breaches if you don't have a pattern set up of understanding the data out there? Spot on, man. Is there a mechanism out there that kind of encapsulates and holds all that information?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there might be one that's out there on the market now, but that again, another key component of 351 might be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but
Yeah, sorry.
okay. But the idea behind that is that we're storing it into one location so we can make sense of it over time. So 351X is solving that problem. So, and with that, I think collections, we've covered collections,
Yeah.
critically important to the CI mission, but what's after collections?
Analysis and production. And let me tell you, I've worked with good analysts and I've worked with the whole other side of the spectrum. A good or great analyst is essential to counterintelligence. When you look at what analysis and production is, all this raw information is coming in, and it's coming in through the various intelligence disciplines out there. It's unusable products. To be an analyst, thank you for anybody that's listening that's an analyst. Again, you've got one of the hardest jobs out there. You're trying to make sense of these various products that are coming in, taking unusable products, making it actionable insights or actionable intelligence. Really kind of holistic look across everything that's happening and getting reported to identify leaks, leads, or breaches.
Yeah, and young counterintelligence agent Ryan Rambo didn't put enough stock into analysis and production. He was more about actions on the ground, investigations, operations, and collections. That was the whole thing. My whole life was driven off of that until I came into contact with John Fair, who grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, "You're going to go meet." And he did. He introduced me to the analysts, and they were putting things together that blew me away. And so now I fully understand the value of analysis. And anytime I'm in a corporate environment and I'm setting up an insider threat program or a corporate counterintelligence program, one of the first things that I want is a good analyst, whether it's just a school-trained OSINT analyst or cybersecurity analyst. Anything that has analyst at the end of that title, I want them because love to sit down and go through piles and piles of information and make sense of it. And they're very good at it. I had a young analyst. I call him young. He wasn't really young, but smart guy. I won't name his name because he's actually getting ready to graduate from a course, FLETC, next week. But he was my analyst and one of the corporate jobs I had. Went to NYU, got his bachelor's degree in poli-sci, that went on to Georgetown University and got a master's in national security studies. That dude was the smartest guy I ever worked with in my whole life. From an analytical standpoint, he was making connections I could not dream of making. And it was just because that's how he was wired. You know, he loved to collaborate with other analysts, loved to compare notes, loved to dig into the data and put the puzzle together. It's just amazing from like an old, grayback, silverback counterintelligence agent standpoint to sit back and watch that person put two pieces together. It's just incredible and incredibly useful.
Yeah, when I think about analysis and production, the analysis piece on it, I think it ties into the other functions as well, investigations and how analysis can be applied. They can help you understand in an investigation, is this the method that the adversary usually uses? And if so, is it supported by other data? And is that other data an indicator of things that have already happened or are going to happen? And when we get to functional service, I'll explain how that can be leveraged. But it supplements investigations. It helps those investigators out there refine their investigative plan or their looks or their interviews and asking questions to sources in the subject, to be honest. When I look at operations, the same thing. Where do we go? I want to come up with an operation. They help you refine a target. They help you refine what you need to protect: people, technology, critical infrastructure. But really, again, having an analyst out there, like you just said, Ryan, critical to being an effective counterintelligence agent. And I've got to give them mad respect because the amount of data that they have to filter through and their ability to kind of piecemeal and put the puzzle together is extraordinary. And the individuals who are both tied to investigations and operations, they can almost predict the future of when something's going to happen, or they can kind of tip and say, this investigation ties with this operation over here. Here's the likely outcome of their ability to assess in their production products. Man, amazing to me. I will caution in the future, though, that reducing that cognitive burden and taking technologies out there to reduce that by a fraction. What I've seen an analyst put together, which could take months, can now be done with the right tool and decrease that time in a week or a day, an hour. So technology, I think, is going to be critical to reduce that cognitive burden for analysis and production.
I agree. And it goes back to the databasing of the information to make sure that it's properly formatted and that it can be adjusted into some of these new tools that we have coming into the market so that it can reach back and make sense and tie that data together. We had a conversation with Randy Stickley a couple of weeks ago, and he was an OSINT analyst, and he said, even though the tools are there and available to us, it's going to make an analyst's job so much easier. You still have to be able to understand how the data was analyzed. And, just saying I clicked a button is just not going to make sense anymore. So you have to understand the data. You have to understand the tool that you're using to produce a report. But also you have to understand the sources and the validity of the sources that the information is coming from.
Yeah, it's such a great point. Adversarial intelligence out there is conducting counterintelligence operations to shape what we want them to see as well. Just because there's a piece of information in our system for an analyst, they need to take a look at it to make sure, is it credible? Can it be validated? And is it something we need to use to further one of our investigations? Which that's spot on, Ryan. And Ryan, as we look at, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you about production because we
Mhm.
understand the analysis side of it and they're putting the pieces together, but I think production gets overlooked. And whether
Yeah.
that's a quarterly trend, an annual trend, a threat specific trend, like, hey, this is what the Russians are doing, or this is what the Chinese are doing, being able to tie all of this data into together, analyze it, assess it, and then produce the product. The production side of this is so critical to making sure that everybody is aware of trends and previous threats and historical context. And that's the beautiful things that another beautiful thing that analysts do for us.
Yeah, I agree. That production piece, all this information out there is useless until it's put in a form you can actionably action it, if you will, or decision makers can make an informed risk decision to go after something. But yeah, analysis needs to lead to production because if you're not producing a product to assess or predict, what are we doing this for?
Exactly. So huge shout out to analysts. I love you. You're my best friends. Please connect with me. Share your products with me. I just enjoy reading them, and I'm kind of a nerd like that. So uh, thank you for everything that you do.
Super savvy. I echo everything Ryan just said as well. Thank you for doing what you do. You make our lives as counterintelligence agents out there that much better, that much easier. And it's a joint effort, it's a combined force because we're chartered to protect information, we're chartered to protect critical infrastructure and technology. Ryan, as we look at the last function of counterintelligence, what do you think? What is it?
Functional services. Well, I've known it as functional services my whole counterintelligence career, but there's also another term for it. It's technical services. Huh, that's kind of interesting. So, technical or functional services. Jeremy, what does that kind of boil down into?
Yeah, I think it's the hodgepodge of everything else out there, right? It's those supporting type of roles, things that can enhance operations, support collections, support investigations. So I'll start. I think that there's really kind of big four, and the list goes on, but in the essence of time, technical surveillance countermeasures, people who find bugs in offices, or at the other side, place bugs in offices for investigations or operations. Polygraph. You taking a polygraph, Ryan?
I have taken a polygraph, most uncomfortable feeling in the whole world.
Ditto, right? It's a functional service of counterintelligence, a counterintelligence polygraph. Now, I look at their surveillance to me, whether it's physical or technical, that's a functional service. It's a support function to either an operation, investigation, or collection. And that last one, maybe we could talk a little bit more in depth later on, but is that cyber type of piece, cyber counterintelligence. What do you think
And
about those four?
I all critical. And again, I'll have to go back to the polygraphers because they do subject interviews all the time. That's all
Yeah.
they do is subject interview. They never know who they're going into the booth with. And there might be a nice polygrapher out there somewhere. I've never met them. They're all the same person. Just they tough job, but God, they're so critically important. They catch a lot of spies too.
Yeah.
One though that wasn't mentioned, and I think probably important to mention is psychologists.
Oh, good
And,
point. You're right.
so I know you and I have used psychologists in the past, both from an operation standpoint and an investigation standpoint. And they don't get the love that they deserve. They also do a lot of the screening and vetting for people going into specialized programs, just to understand strengths, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and that sort of thing. But psychologists, man, I don't know. I couldn't imagine doing an operation or an investigation without a psychologist these days.
Yeah, that's spot on, Ryan. When I look at investigations for an unsubject, right, somebody unsubstantiated, they don't know who's doing something, they can put a profile together just based on what was compromised or based on the tip that was kind of put in. I mean, it kind of helped with the Robert Hansen case a little bit. The Bureau and the Mole is one book that comes to mind. But using an operational psychologist to put a profile together of somebody who's already committed espionage for an investigation. In an operation, kind of the same thing, the profile of the adversary that is running that particular operation so we can get our human brethren in front of them to do their clandestine activities. But yeah, I think that's a great point. And also I've used it several times through my career because we're in that program. It was just talking to the operational psychologist about the pace that we move at as counterintelligence special agents or case officers out there, the pace that we're moving, are we at burnout factor? Do we need to take a step back? Do we need to do a little look at ourselves? I think that's just as critically important as well. And they offer that.
And they're the best. I mean, I've worked with some of the best in the world, and I value everything that they bring to the table. So let's go back through them again. So there's TSM, which fantastic group of people, and we know a few TSEMers, and
That's right.
God, the things that they go through every day is just incredible. They never know where they're going to find themselves, whether it's a building, a plane, a car, a new office location, a hotel room. I mean, they're everywhere, and they do such a fantastic job. They're always on the front line, and every TSEM person that I've ever talked to needs to go talk to a psychologist about burnout.
For sure.
Always on the road. So we got TSEM, we got the polygraphers. I've already spoke to them. You mentioned cyber. I think did I skip one? Okay.
No, surveillance. But going back to TSEM first, real quick, investigations. They support investigations out there by employing and implanting bugs on people they think that are spies. That's a more intrusive means, so that's going to be a little bit further, require more approvals, but they're going to be the ones that put it out there together. They do sweeps on rooms for operations. If an adversary was in a room, they're going to take a look to see if somebody left something nefarious in it. They can look at the whole RF spectrum. But when I think about TSCM and technical counter surveillance measures, I got to give a shout out to Scott Goff. I've known him, consider him a brother, love him. Scott's done this for pretty much his entire career. And we were chatting a couple of weeks ago when we were at CES, right? We were chatting just on the side about his mission. You're not kidding, that burnout factor. That guy has gone around the world more than anybody I've ever met in my life with all this kit and going out there. And we got to talking, and I asked him, Scott, how do you look for threats? Here you are, you're working with these different teams. You're told go. How do you get a vector to point you in the right direction? He scratches his head, it's a fair point. I don't know. I just do it all. I'm like, man, I think that there's probably would warrant for the TSCM community some type of plug of analysis and production to help them refine what they're looking at. So when they go in, they know it's probably going to be here. Let me focus on that and work around from there. Give them that pointed vector. But how, again, a functional service can be supported by analysis, either doing a collection, an operation, or an investigation.
Yeah, Scott's such great people. I love hearing his stories. So great guys. I can't wait to get him onto the show, actually. But I digress. So
maybe he'll come on and explain TSCM for us. You asked what was the next one. I would say, let's go into surveillance, right? Physical surveillance is a means to support an operation or investigation.
Yeah, hardest job ever. I am not a surveillance operator. Wish I was, because it sounds really cool, but I glow as soon as I hit the street. And so that mission, and I know some really great surveillance operators out there. They're uncanny people. They're the most patient people, and they blend into the background so well. You got to have those people.
I only did surveillance through the training course a couple times, and awkward. I can't do one thing, let alone 9 things at once. And then I get so bored so quickly sitting in a car for hours on end for minutes of action. Oh boy. I love people that love surveillance, because thank you. I never, ever want to do it. Hours of boredom followed by minutes of madness is how it was couched to me when conducting physical surveillance. And again, that's one mechanism of surveillance. Man, when it's on, and it's catch bad guys doing bad things.
100%. So love the surveillance team, have utilized them, have done them before. God, I don't want it to be that guy again. Really don't, but God bless them. I love them. So, and then last but not least is cyber. And, back in the day, back before I got introduced to cybersecurity tools and logging and that capability, I couldn't barely turn on a computer. And to have a team that was dedicated to doing all the cyber aspects for us as investigators, or from an operations standpoint, critically invaluable. that we had to have them. And I don't know about you, but I'm still not that great with computers, and so we
Yeah.
rely heavily on our cyber team to do that work for us.
Yeah, cyber to me, I mean, boy, that's a whole new domain. It's fairly new, probably within the past 10 years, just as technology tries to advance. But honestly, if you're looking at the five functions, Ryan, between you, me, and our audience, I think cyber can be its own function. I mean, it's so diverse. It's its own domain. You have the physical realm, and then you have the cyber realm now too in the domain. And it's just going the reaction time for an investigation or the outreach and the global connectivity. It's going to take a specific expert just to deal with that, whether it's an investigation or an operation. Boy, just the cyber piece to me, whether it's shutting threats down, trying to understand what's happening, that's just a whole new skill set and potentially another function.
I agree with you. So we started the conversation with five core functions of counterintelligence, but I think it could be blown out, and maybe we need to revisit it in the manuals and as a community. And so I agree. So the sixth function could be cybersecurity alone, and so that would be the sixth function. Is there another one that you see floating out there that could potentially be a seventh?
Yeah, so I think a lot of thought needs to be just kind of looked at with technology out there, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning. We're advancing at such a rapid speed anymore. I think it's going to take a unique individual and unique skill set to be able to look at protecting what it's like as technology modernizes very quickly, again, with these new technologies and the advances in AI and ML. I just think there's probably worthy of a conversation of what does that look like for now and right now, the future. What do you think, Ryan?
I agree. I mean, AI, you've got drone technology, you've got humanoids coming out. We really, from a counterintelligence standpoint, I think we would benefit from having an S&T type function that would just take a look at all of this emerging technology and then putting it into the context of counterintelligence and then how it could support some of the other functions that we have up and down. I just think it's too big to lump into the functional services bucket.
Yeah, it's such a great call. You know, when I retired and I jumped on board on the task force to help the Army modernize the intelligence disciplines, what kept me up at night trying to support the warfighter was when information was already corrupted by the time it got into the hands of the soldier. And when they needed it the most, it didn't work. And I'll explain. So there's a requirement out there to make whatever type of widget the Army wants. They put it out there. They maybe send it off to a university, which the university may have already a spy in it, and maybe they're working on a grant that we pay them to come here to work on this technology, a dual use technology that's going to be in the hands of the military. As this technology is being developed right from the onset, it's free and open. And all of a sudden now it gets pulled into the military channels. This widget is put into a device. And without us even knowing it, the device could be compromised right from the requirements and acquisition phase. And I think that's just going to take a whole new skill set, not just supply chain risk management. I think that is a piece of it. Understanding the technologies, using analysis and production to understand where materials are being sourced from, what the threat is, and who is working on that at a university, tying back to collections, and going out there understanding what your footprint looks like in your covering agent program or your particular kind of field office or your unit, your regional area. But I think you're spot on. S&T type of function. Boy, again, when I think about the warfighter, when a soldier's out there and he needs to use widget X and it doesn't work, man, we failed them.
Yeah, and I think on the corporate side too, an S&T function would go out and work with corporate entities that have both a commercial side to it and a federal side. Making sure that we're out there and protecting that stuff, and that S&T function would, and the team that supported that effort would be solely responsible for going out there and protecting that emerging technology. So, just to kind of recap, so there are the five functions that we know. That's investigations, operations, collections, analysis, and production, and of course the functional areas. But the two additional ones that we would offer up and maybe propose to doctrinal type people to make the change would be cybersecurity would be its own. It would roll out from underneath functional services and become its own function. and then an S&T type function for counterintelligence. So they would be at 7. I think 7 functions is probably about the right answer.
I think so too. 7 dwarves, right? 7's a good round number. 7-minute abs, 7 functions.
The body by Jake comes into play. Love it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, as I look at this whole thing, I know we're coming up on time, right? In the functions of counterintelligence, it's imperative for individuals out there trying to be a counterintelligence or already are a counterintelligence professional. Take a look and understand at least the baseline levels of what each function is, because every counterintelligence program out there needs to be full spectrum. Analysis supports investigations, which supports operations, which is fed by collections, which the functional services help do things that an agent can't do. If it's in the cyber domain, it's something else. If it's at the S&T level, I mean, good Lord, there's so many things out there. Just it's incumbent upon us as professionals to know your material, know full spectrum counterintelligence. And when you're putting plans together, think about it at the larger aperture, just not your silo of an investigation, but the whole picture as a big campaign to protect equity.
And I agree. And if you're on the corporate side, look at your counterintelligence, insider threat program, your security program through the same lens. You need to build each one of these functions into your program so that you have a holistic approach to risk management and threat identification and neutralization. So you may be a smaller team, but you still need all of the functions to be a functional security element.
Yeah, Ryan, before we jumped on our call to the audience out there, we were just sharing books that we read, right? We're showing each other what we have here. We have, I think, collectively, amongst the most of us, probably every book possible out there that has to deal with counterintelligence, either on the government side or the corporate side, whether it's a spy that was caught up like Aldrich James, Robert Hansen, all the way up through probably Leon Ding. Then what episode was that, 4, I think, talking about the corporate side of it. If our listeners out there just want any type of a reading list, hey, reach out, be happy to share it.
Yeah, for sure. So Jeremy, another great part of the series, part 3 is kind of in the bag. What could our listeners look forward to in part 4?
I love it. So now we understand the what is counterintelligence. Why do we do counterintelligence? How we do counterintelligence. Any profession out there, to understand where you're going or where you're at, you have to understand how you evolved to where you are. So history, and I'm looking forward to that because we're going way back in time to talk about just kind of moving forward with counterintelligence.
And just barely, talking about where we're going with part 4, you mentioned pyramids and
That's
Greek.
right.
Good Lord, I'm going to learn so much during part 4. I can't wait to get into this discussion. I hope I could add anything. I'll probably just sit there and just ask you questions and bring it back up.
Whatever, you're a smart dude. I'm excited about it, to be honest, and I do think going back that far, and it'll be a short episode for our audience out there. We're going to try to keep it to 45 minutes to 50 minutes. But I think it is important to talk about several different things and how counterintelligence has evolved, because the second oldest profession is spying. And if you have a spy, you're going to have somebody who needs to protect against that.
Absolutely.
Ryan, so last words to our audience. Any imparting knowledge?
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the listens. Please like us on the different platforms. Please reach out to us if you want to be a guest. If you have any questions or you want to correct any of the crazy things that I've said, please reach out and let me know. So thank you again for listening, and thanks again for all of the great feedback. Jeremy?
Yeah, I love it. If you're a functional SME out there and you want to come on board to talk your particular skill set, let's do it. Let's get you on board. And as always, if you see something that's nefarious, report it, tell somebody. Thanks for giving us a listen.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more, please visit our website at ixnsolutions.com or visit it with us on LinkedIn and some of the other social media platforms. And with that, Jeremy, another great episode.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate it.